The American League Central, a place you'll find a number of interesting things. Over here, you'll find the literal worst team in baseball history. Then over here is the Kansas City Royals, who have had the biggest turnaround from last season, going from 106 losses to the postseason. Take a corner, and over on the right are the Cleveland canceled Indians and now Guardians, who continue to be one of the most consistent and successful franchises in baseball, with a pro boxer as their third baseman and an absolute madman as their first baseman. Take a left, a right, another left, and down the street will be the all-pale Minnesotans in heartbreak over the Twins having an ultimate collapse to miss the playoffs because they couldn't beat good teams. But the most interesting thing in this division is down the street a little more. Take a right, another right, over the hill, and you'll find the Detroit Tigers in the most magical team this year. A team that was as irrelevant as Charlie Sheen's career now, with just a month and a half left in the season. I mean, like, nobody was talking about the Detroit Tigers other than how embarrassing Javier Baez continued to be, and a couple good players like Tarik Skubal, for example, who I'll get more into. But the bottom line is, the Tigers were just there, just existing. And all of a sudden, Javier Baez was deemed out for the year, so the team automatically became good again. That's all they needed. No, but one of the most improbable regular season finishes has happened. Really quick, if you're not dead and watching this, like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet, or just wait to see if you enjoy the video and then make a decision. That works too. Let's just look at the Tigers as an individual team, and you'll quickly realize that the charm with this team really isn't with any of the names. The most notable by far, Tarik Skubal, deserves all the love in the world and more for what he's done this year. I mean, it's truly incredible. Skubal's been a big leaguer for 5 years now, and for the first 4 years, he just couldn't fully put it together. Now, if you actually look at his numbers since his first year in 2020, the ERA has only gone down each season. In 2023, he pitched great, but unfortunately for only 80 innings because of a back issue that kept him out for the first half of the year. But what he did when he came back, especially to end the season when he was insanely dominant, was a good preview of what was to come. Because in 2024, this man has become a top pitcher in the game. It's pretty surreal just how great he's been. He has the most wins in baseball, the most strikeouts in baseball, the lowest ERA in the American League. I mean, just from top to bottom, everything about him has been beyond what you could ask for from a starting pitcher. He's been above and beyond an ace for Detroit this year, and without him, the Tigers easily do not make the postseason. So shout out Tarik Skubal backing up one of the weaker offenses in baseball, which is what the Tigers offense is, which again is okay for what this team is. It's definitely not like the last Tigers team we saw make the postseason, with guys like Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez roaming around in what was arguably baseball's best offense. No, the Tigers offense now looks like this. It's made mostly of guys who aren't really good hitters, like one of their catchers, the main one this year, for example, Jake Rogers. He hasn't been a great hitter, but he's still pretty reliable to the team in his own kind of way. And by the way, you cannot tell me this guy doesn't look like he's from some other time period. He definitely doesn't look like he belongs in 2024. More like the 1800s. I can never help but feel that way when looking at the guy. There's something off about him. Not in a bad way, just in that kind of way. But as for the offense, there's two guys who have been solid and two guys that have been really good. Parker Meadows, for example, the younger brother of Austin Meadows, only played half the year but had a solid year at the plate. And he started off really bad too. Like really, really bad. But ended up having a great August followed by a solid September to end the year. Matt Vierling has played almost every game for the Tigers this year and has been solid. Like the definition of solid. Nothing too sexy, but above average numbers and an above average productive season. And those are the solid hitters. As for the really good ones, Riley Green has played most of the games this year while putting up really good numbers. He's had the most pop on the team, one that doesn't have much, just an overall really good bat. And then comes Kerry Carpenter, who did deal with spine inflammation and had to miss a good chunk of games for that. But when he's played, he's been the Tigers' best hitter. He's been great. But overall, this Tigers lineup really doesn't have much thump to it. They're 23rd in all baseball in OPS, second to last in all baseball in on-base percentage, 22nd in slugging percentage, meaning they don't hit for much power, and then being 24th in total home runs backs that up even further. They're also 24th in batting average, top 10 in strikeouts. I think you get the idea by now. The Tigers are a bottom-tier offense in every category possible. There's no one or two star hitters blowing everyone away and lurking dangerously for any pitcher facing Detroit. No Shohei Ohtani or Aaron Judge, or to stay in the American League Central, no Jose Ramirez or Bobby Witt Jr. waiting in the wings. There's none of that. There's not one hitter, at least as of today, at all close to the caliber of those hitters, which is what makes this story and this team even more fascinating. And what it shows is that it's truly taken an entire team to get this done. Now, yeah, every baseball team is a team that needs most, if not every guy on the roster to help out in order to win enough games and make the playoffs. But the Tigers have just taken that to another level. This team has done a great job of finding ways to win, despite not having the strongest and sexiest of rosters, especially from a hitting standpoint. When you don't have that super-powered star to rely on in big moments, when you have an offense that's just lackluster and without any stars, you really have to be unselfish. Nobody can want to be the hero, and this team's executed this style well. And what makes things even crazier is that this team sold at the trade deadline. In fact, the Tigers were such sellers at the deadline that rumors were saying Skubal might even be dealt. He was up in the air. That never ended up happening, but that should just give you an idea of the extent this team was willing to go to say screw it and throw this year and future ones in the trash, really. But even though they didn't trade Skubal, they still traded the veterans on the team, including the second best pitcher on the staff, Jack Flaherty. They also sent away Andrew Chafin and Mark Canha. So again, Skubal stays, but to send away 3 veterans like that, including your second best starter, what kind of message does that send to that clubhouse? They didn't add anybody. They had no intention of doing that. I mean, can you really blame them? They were 5 games under 500 at the time. The roster looked bleak. I mean, why would you add to a team like this? They only sold, trading away the veterans, and it all showed the obvious, or at least what at the time seemed obvious. This season's done, but little did I, you, any of us, how little did the Tigers probably themselves even know, the season was not indeed done. These boys just kept grinding and grinding, but also did something the Minnesota Twins failed to do. You could basically call the Tigers the antithesis of the Twins, considering what exactly they did that got them back to October. The Twins fooled us all into thinking they were a good team this year by having an incredible record against bad teams. In reality, as we know now, they weren't necessarily a bad team, but considering how awful of a time they had against good teams, it exposed the truth. They just weren't a playoff team. They were good enough to beat the bad teams a lot, but not good enough to be a playoff team. Let's go back to August 17th. The Tigers are 4 games under 500, while the Twins are 70-53. So with about a month and a half of the season to go, the Twins are 17 games over 500 and the Twins are 4 games under. But from August 17th and on, the Tigers were set to have the quote-unquote easiest remaining schedule out of any team in baseball, considering their remaining opponents had a combined .462 win percentage, the lowest any team would be facing from that point on. And the Twins, from August 17th on, the Twins were set to have one of the hardest schedules remaining, as their remaining opponents had a .507 win percentage. Well, the Twins from that point on went on to piss the bed completely, while the Tigers took advantage of having the weakest schedule in baseball, going on a crazy hot run to shoot way over 500 and make the playoffs. But another thing about the Tigers against certain opponents, there weren't any lopsided times they had against any teams, good or bad. Like the Twins, for example, they were the opposite. They went 0-6 against the Yankees, 3-10 against Cleveland. There were some teams that just steamrolled them, but when you look at the Tigers' individual matchups, there's not a single team that stomped them. Even the teams that won more head-to-head matchups against the Tigers, it was only a couple more at most, other than the Braves, who swept the Tigers in the one series they played this year. But overall, Detroit really held their ground against everybody, even the good teams. They didn't necessarily dominate those good teams, not all of them, but they kept their stride strong enough over time to stay alive and not get too far below 500 or anything, before feasting on the weakest schedule left in the last month and a half to get to where they are now. And they did this all with a pitching staff that started watching one of their best now dominating in Los Angeles with the Dodgers. No problem, Skubal's continue to be the best and carry most of the workload, while guys like Reese Olson is having a good sophomore year, Casey Mize, who's having his first full go at a big league season since 2021, has been solid, and the Tiger bullpen has been huge. Like, they have some studs back there who have come from seemingly nowhere to play such a big part in the Tigers sweeping the rug from underneath everyone and shocking us all. And another thing I find interesting and kind of cool is how most of the guys on this team have been Tigers for at least a little bit. It's not like this 2024 group formed more recently. I mean, most of these guys have been in Detroit at least a couple years before this one, and that includes the guys that have come through huge in the bullpen. Jason Foley, the closer, someone who's been a Tiger his whole career so far since 2021, has been good. Tyler Holton has sneakily been one of the best relievers in all of baseball for 2 years now. He had an awesome 2023 season and has picked up right where he left off. He also throws a ton of innings for a reliever. He's thrown almost 100 innings, partly because he's gotten some starts, but overall, he's been an important arm. Will Vest also had a really good 2023 season and was only built off of that in 2024, also throwing a lot of innings for a reliever. Brandon Hanafy, another underrated reliever, a rookie, someone who came up in August, has been lights out since. This 2024 Detroit Tigers team really just has been the definition of sneaky. They've perfectly taken advantage of a weak schedule at the end of the season after hanging in there for the first 4.5 months, beating the teams they're supposed to beat, and it's truly been an organizational success from top to bottom and everyone involved with this team. AJ Hinch, yeah, I know, the former Astros manager who was there when they cheated, has done a great job with this team. And by the way, yes, Hinch deserves flack for his role with the Astros scandal, but to be fair, if anyone in that organization deserves credit for going against that whole system, Hinch reportedly smashed the TV monitors the players were using twice to stop them from doing it. It of course wasn't enough in the end, and as the manager, someone who had a lot of power in stopping it, didn't stop it, but I'll at least give him credit for that. But either way, he got his suspension, got fired from the Astros, got the Tigers job in 2021, and after 3 miserable seasons and a 4th that looked to be another forgotten year in Detroit, Hinch has led this team back to something it hasn't seen in 10 years. The Tigers don't have Carlos Correa making over $30 million, and neither do they have the young superstar Bobby Witt Jr. with his big contract or Jose Ramirez. In fact, the Tigers' biggest contracts are Javier Baez making $25 million, and then Kenta Maeda, who's making $14 million. The next most expensive deal on the roster, Colt Keith making $2.8 million, and then Tarik Skubal making $2.6 million. And as for the 2 highest paid guys on the team, they both suck. Javier Baez has gone down to be one of, if not the worst contracts and busts in baseball history, who's now out for the year, and Kenta Maeda, the second richest guy in the Tigers, has been awful this year. So you look at this Tigers team, the guys who are contributing, it's one that's pretty much made up of entirely guys making a couple $1 million, if not the league minimum salary. It's not a juggernaut at all. It's the farthest thing from a juggernaut. There's no really superstars, but they've come together and all done their part, along with AJ Hinch, the rest of his coaching staff, the front office. Every person from top to bottom has come together to put up the most team effort possible to shock the world and suddenly get the Detroit Tigers back into the postseason. And it's one of the most magical things I've ever seen. Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for watching.
And when I asked you in the middle of the season, remember I asked you, what kind of team do you want to be? I guess you wanted to be a playoff team.